Recently, our managing editor, Martha Jennings, got a call from the White House, letting her know President Donald Trump was coming to Raleigh in just a few days. Martha, who is a ball of energy on a slow day, kicked into action and started making plans. She also told me she, quote, asked for the moon from the press secretary. Could we get an interview with someone before the visit? Could we be on the tour of the vaccine manufacturer that he was going on? And one of the ultimate gets? Get the coveted one-on-one interview with the president. A day later, she got another call that WRAL was going to get the interview, and they requested that long-term anchor David Crabtree do it. You're listening to How to Commit Journalism, a podcast from the Capital Broadcasting Podcast Network. I'm Enterprise Executive Producer Ashley Talley here at WRAL in Raleigh, and today I talk with David Crabtree about his interview with President Trump this week, along with the other presidents he's interviewed in the past. David, thank you so much for joining me.
Our managing editor, Martha Jennings, called me with the news, and of course I said yes. And we began to find out the ground rules. There are always ground rules with any president. I remember interviewing President Obama at the White House. We had 7 minutes. We stretched it to 8.5. Normally you're able to do that. We were told we had 5 minutes, so I thought, well, maybe I'll get 6 minutes with him. We were told this would involve, first off on Monday, a test for COVID-19. And of course, if either myself or the photographer who was lined up to shoot this, Keith Baker, tested positive, then we go home for 14 days. We test negative, then we would come onto the site in Mooresville and wait for the president and wait for the interview. Here was the kicker in the whole thing. He does not make the decision of whether or not to actually go through with the interview until he is in the air in Air Force One coming to the location.
That's crazy.
So the advance team and the White House press office said, we believe this will happen, but we want you to know there is no guarantee until he says, let's do it. And so we get there, and the order of the day was totally reversed. We had been told the order of the day would be our interview before he did anything else after he arrived at Fujifilm, then the tour, and then a briefing. Instead, he came in, he was running a half hour late. They did the briefing first, then the tour, and then about 5 minutes before the interview happened, a media person came to us and said, let's go.
Were you nervous at that point? Were you thinking, gosh, he already did the presser, he's probably not going to do the interview now?
I leaned over to Keith Baker as we were waiting, and I said, I feel about 50-50 on this. I was not nervous, but there was some anxiety there because you've been waiting all day. It's your assignment. Although I knew it was not on my shoulders whether or not it would happen. There's anxiety, and you're trying to prep. Once we were taken to the interview room, it was a small room where there was lots of equipment in there, fans running. We were only allowed to use one camera, and we like to shoot interviews, of course, with 3. We could not attach a lavalier microphone to the president, so we had to use a boom mic. Keith could not be off his shoulder, as we say in the business. He had to shoot the interview on a tripod, static. So I'm holding the boom microphone.
I was going to ask who was holding the mic.
Interviewing the 45th president of the United States, and I could not hold my notes.
Oh, man. Wow.
I had to keep everything here in the head and concentrate and focus on what I wanted to ask, what his answers were, how to follow up, and how to learn to do the presidential two-step, which is a sidestep dance move that I had to learn to do with Bill Clinton during the Lewinsky scandal. I had to learn to do it with Jimmy Carter after he had written a book on Iran and the hostages. I had to do it with President Obama when he was in a term where he felt all was lost. Every president does that dance very well. And you have to be careful that they don't step on your toes while you're dancing, or you don't step on theirs, or you don't get kicked in the shin.
Something something they must learn to get where they are, I guess, is learning that two-step.
I think when you have Potomac fever, you learn to do that dance.
Potomac fever. I've never heard that. Tell me about, let's go back beforehand real quick. Tell me about that COVID test that you guys had to take, because we've been doing stories about people taking COVID and it taking like 10 or 12 days to get results back. That was not the case for you guys.
Two things about that. You asked earlier if I was nervous. I had more anxiety over taking that test because at first I thought, okay, we're going to have this long swab stuck back to my brain. And I'm thinking, oh, no. But it was very simple. It's what everyone, if you go through a drive-through, and this was at CVS, I think, or Walgreens, but it was set up by the White House. Mm-hmm. We had a window, a 15-minute window, and if we were late, it was no go. So we arrived early. When the government wants something, the government can get something, which I felt a little guilty about, quite honestly. It's the same way with athletes being tested, whether it's the NBA or Major League Baseball. Scientifically, you can get the results very quickly.
Right.
But the general public has to wait. And so Keith and I both talked about that, a feeling a little uneasy with that, but those were the rules. And we waited for 34 minutes. The phone rings. You're walked through. This is so-and-so with the results from your COVID test. And
you got it back in 30 minutes?
Yeah, about 33. And they pause. And you're thinking, oh no. And then she said, you tested negative. You do not have COVID-19. And I'm going, yes, thank you. We had a wristband then placed on us by the Secret Service showing that we had been tested and we were negative. And then we were allowed to go our way.
So you were waiting while he toured, while he did the presser. Tell me about where you were taken to actually interview him. To me, it looked like a doctor's office or something. But what was that room?
Well, keep in mind, you're in a lab. So right. The walls are very drab. It's a very sterile room, although on the walls there are piping and tubing with a handle for pressure about every 3 or 4 feet along the wall. And I thought, oh my gosh, don't let me back into this thing right about the time the interview begins. But it was a very sterile room with nothing to absorb sound. So sound is bouncing off the walls. And I'm wearing a mask. So you're talking like this part of the time. The president walked in wearing a mask and walked over and said, do I stand here? And Keith said, yes, sir. And he looked at us and he said, do I need to take this off? And I said, you're the president. You, whatever you want to, I'm keeping mine on. And it was interesting, actually, at one point, we were standing, I thought 6 feet apart. But before we began, he said, could you back up a little bit?
Really?
And so we took another probably 1.5 feet step back. So there was 7 feet or so distance between us. Yeah.
Tell me about this. How long did you get? You were promised 5 minutes. How long did you get with President Trump?
8:31.
Okay.
When you look at the recording, as we were pulling sound for reports last night, I asked Keith Baker, the photographer, said, how long were we in there? How long was the interview? And he said 8:31. At that point, we had been given a sign to wrap it up, and so we did. And Keith at one point wanted to take a photograph as we were recording, and he raised his iPhone to snap a couple of pictures, and he said from behind, he don't know who it was, but a hand came up and slowly brought his hand down. So I don't know if the White House took any shots of that. They normally do, but our photographic evidence is the video.
How to Commit Journalism will be right back after this.
So how did you prep for it? How did you decide what questions were most important to ask, what you wanted to ask first, that sort of thing?
I talked with several people. In fact, I talked with 4 people that I really trust from different walks of life, and said, if you had one question you could ask this president, what would it be? And one of those 4 people was my younger daughter. And I used her question at the end about, with all the divisiveness in the country, how do we even begin to heal when we are so split? And what message do you have for all Americans? I talked to our general manager, who is a very learned person. I talked with the dean of the Divinity School at Duke University, and I talked with a colleague of mine here in the newsroom, and a person of color, and I said, I'm really interested, if you were there, what you would ask. I listened to that. I listened to the briefing. You get in the room and you think you're going to start with this, and then all of a sudden another thought comes in and you pivot and you go with what's there. So you can do all the prepping in the world. And in this case, when your notes are set aside and you're recalling bullet points in your mind, you think, what are some of the issues that are outside the purview of what the Capitol Hill Press Corps, the White House Press Corps asked every day.
Right.
Every day. And I thought, I'm not going to go down that path with these precious 300 seconds to ask the same thing we hear asked every day. I was looking, quite honestly, actually, what I was hoping to find was a bit of a flavor of humanity within this person.
Do you think you did?
Yes, not to the degree that I was hoping for.
It's all part of that dance, right?
It is part of the dance, and it's part of the perspective of the other person. You know, I don't care who we are, we bring our own lens to the table, don't we? We try to step back and say, oh no, I'm going to be objective about this. And you have to be careful you don't step so far back that you miss why you're there. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, you don't come in all cocky about, well, I'm going to do this. No, you listen. And I was taught years ago, and it's been affirmed by almost every news director I've ever worked for, is you ask the question. If you don't get the answer you're looking for, it's not up for you to say, you didn't answer my question. No, I've answered your question. It's up to the viewer, and in this case, /voter, to respond in their way of saying, well, he didn't answer that question, or, well, I like that. It's not up to me to determine what the answer is supposed to be. It's up to me to ask the question. Now, do I receive grief over that? You bet I do. I receive it every day I interview, or every time I interview Governor Cooper, I receive that from Republicans. Mm-hmm. Yesterday and today I've received it from Democrats.
It's
part of the drill.
We got a lot of feedback last night, and I answer.
I see that look.
Yeah, well, a lot of feedback. But what I really liked about it is that it was from both Democrats and Republicans, and they were all mad. So it's like, you know, you're not going to. People are coming with their own lenses, and they're hearing what they, hear through the lens of their experience. But I kind of feel like if neither side is happy, then we're doing our job. Like we're going down the middle and asking them questions.
We'll be right back after this break.
You have interviewed have you interviewed every president in the past?
No.
30 years?
I met George W. Bush, but never had a one-on-one with him. I was in a gaggle where we could shout questions. And the same with his father. I never had the chance to interview the first President Bush. But Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Ronald Reagan. I forgot, that just slipped my mind. Ronald Reagan, when he was at Duke in 1986, and I was working down east at WITN.
ITN? Wow.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. I mean, those are all, I'm sure, very unique experiences. any memorable moments stand out, or did all of them have a certain personality when you talked to them, and did they emit a presence that made them feel presidential?
Yes, one. I love that question. With Jimmy Carter, it was great because he had written a couple of books then that I wanted to talk with him about. One about the hostages in Iran, but the other about his mother, Miss Lillian.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote in the book about how she would. One of the reasons he sent her in the Peace Corps was to get her out of the White House, because she would get a few drinks in her, sort of like Martha Mitchell used to do, and she would start calling reporters. And I said, wait a minute, Mr. President, I thought there was no liquor or no alcohol in the Carter White House. He said, no, there was no alcohol for state events, but we had alcohol in the White House, and my mother loved Jack Daniels.
Oh my gosh.
It was this great story. Now you juxtapose that when I'm interviewing Bill Clinton during the Lewinsky blow up. Every time someone else would walk into the room, a press person or whatever, he couldn't keep his eyes focused on me. He was so distracted by everything going on. I don't remember that much about Ronald Reagan, except that he was wearing a brown suit, and I kept thinking, men don't wear brown. Even you, Ronald Reagan, don't wear a brown suit. It just doesn't work.
Some vestiges from the 70s, maybe.
Yeah, but here's what I remember about President Obama. He was going through a tough time in his presidency of getting traction on any bit of legislation. We were in the map room at the White House. Now, this is downstairs. This is where you think about when you feel like, what am I doing here? We were in the room where Roosevelt, Eisenhower, and Churchill planned D-Day.
Oh my God, I have chills.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
When we found out that's where we were, it was like, how did this kid from this small town in Tennessee end up here to do this? But I remember looking at President Obama, and he had his standard answers for everything. But then at one time, I just looked and saw how dead his eyes looked, how you sensed the weight of this office that you had not anticipated had fallen on him. And I get chills thinking about it now, because it was toward the end of the interview. When I finished, I said, Mr. President, we wish you well. And I saw a little bit of a spark come back to his eyes, that he thought, my gosh, there's actually someone who's another human being that's not on my staff, that's not a yes person, that's not trying to direct me, who's not looking to gain anything but wishing me well. And it was a moment. And yesterday when I finished with President Trump, and I said, I wish you the best, and to your family, that was the moment I saw his demeanor change a little bit.
So one thing I noticed when you, President came in, you introduced yourself. You said, hi, I'm David.
Yes.
You didn't say, hi, I'm David Crabtree from WRAL News. I thought that was really human. Was that purposeful?
Yes and no, Ashley. He had been told before he walked in the door who I was. The mask was so inhibiting. Your adrenaline is pumping. You can't shake hands.
Right.
Like normally you would say, or at least wait for the president to extend his hand, or I would just extend mine. It's not the Queen. But you couldn't do that. You just had to stand apart. And I thought, okay, it just came out. I didn't think about it in advance, and I didn't overthink it.
I thought it was a good way to begin. I thought about a young journalist watching that and how instructive it would be for them to, like you've been saying, like you did with Obama, greeting somebody as a person, not as I'm here to grill you or get something out of you.
I learned a long time ago when I worked for a governor in Tennessee, they're human. Their office is to be treated with respect. But they're as human as the rest of us. They have their own foibles. They make their own mistakes, just as we do. They literally do put pants on one leg at a time, like everybody. And you can't get caught up in all the trappings, or it will overwhelm you. One thing that was interesting, I expected when he walked in that room, that is with many politicians, he would just suck the air out of the room.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't happen. He didn't come in with this bravado. Hey, look at me. Glad handing, let's get this party started, which I heard a president say one time. It was business.
And maybe that's the time we're in, or, again,
Yes.
the mask, and you're in a vaccine plant, and it's just.
Yes. And it's been a long day, and it's 104 degrees heat index outside.
In the shade, right.
And I mentioned this in the piece that aired late last night. He never talked about the protesters, but he saw them.
Oh, yeah.
He sees that every day.
It's true.
Every president sees that.
Yeah.
I remember covering the Bush inaugural when there was it was raining that day. Here comes the limousine down Constitution Avenue. And there was one corner where protesters were allowed. They were like in this pen, and they're throwing eggs at the presidential limousine and stuff.
Oh my gosh.
That. And they see a lot, don't they?
They do. Looking back, is there anything else you wish you had asked, or anything you would have done differently, or you were happy with how those 8.5 minutes?
I would have followed up had I known I had the time. And I don't know that I would have gotten a straighter answer. Mm-hmm. But I did ask him, we've learned a lot in the past 4 or 5 months with COVID. Knowing what we know now, would you have done anything differently? And
Yes.
Boy, he just bypassed that and went straight to what he had done right. And I would have come back and said, but Mr. President, we all wish we could have a redo.
Right.
I'm just curious. And I would have also said to him, what keeps you up at night? What's the biggest worry you have as president? And I missed that moment with some of the distractions. If I'd been more focused, I would have gotten that in. That's hindsight. So you try to remember that for the next time of whoever it is,
Yeah.
Because I asked Governor Cooper, what keeps him up at night? I asked Dr. Cohen that. If I had the chance to talk to Dr. Fauci, and how I'm still trying. I so want to talk to Anthony Fauci.
You're going to.
What keeps you up at night? You're 79. And by the way, for those listeners who are younger than I am, you think when you get to a point of more years added to your chronological table, i.e., when you get older, like me, that it's going to get easier and you're going to have things figured out. And not a problem. It gets harder.
Oh, no.
In a way, because you're so aware. Your nerve endings are so exposed, and you've seen so much, and you see so much of the BS that you're hearing these answers, and you're going like, right. Yeah, you got this figured out. If you had it figured out, we wouldn't be in this mess. Okay?
Right.
So I think getting insight from people, again, on their humanity, on where they know they have to say, man, I missed that. Yeah. I'm sorry. I wish I could do that again, is some of the most important things we can find out. And believe me, I got a long list of them. Anybody ever asked me that question? So
me too.
You live with that,
You do.
And you know me well enough that we've talked about this before. It is such a privilege to do what we do. We have access most people never have.
Absolutely.
We have, walking in with a microphone or a camera opens up the world to you. It is such a privilege that people choose us to get their information when they have choices to go anywhere, anytime. And so if that means that I get read the riot act sometimes, okay, it comes with the territory. But I've been doing this now for 39 years. And every day when the camera comes on, it is still like that song. It feels like the first time. And even on the hard days, and God knows there have been hard days, 9/11, stock market crashes, elections,
Sandy Hook.
bombings, the Columbine, Newtown. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But it's still a privilege. And one day it will end. And so until it does, I just want it to hopefully get the most out of it I can.
I think that you do. Thank you so much. One day I'm going to get the whole backstory. I hear there were drums involved in your beginning and into broadcast. And I'm also going to ask you what keeps you up at night, but we'll do that another time.
Yes, and I still play drums in my head. Music's the great escape. So thanks, Ashley.
All right. Thank you, David.
Thanks for listening to How to Commit Journalism, part of Capital Broadcasting's podcast network. To hear all of David's interview with President Trump, head over to our show notes and you'll find a link there.